The miracle of birth. Beautiful, life-changing, body-altering.
Only a few more centimetres and you'll be ready, okay?
How much bigger can the hole get?
But how long after the epidural wears off should new mums and dads be released into the wild world of parenting?
I've spoken to numerous patients who have come in at the 6-week postnatal check and they're like, we felt like we did get hushed out quite quickly. And they would have liked that extra time for some support and education.
In Australia today, about half of new parents head home 1 day or less after an uncomplicated vaginal birth, and about 3 days after a caesarean, compared to the 5 to 7 day stretch standard in Australian hospitals until the mid-1990s.
Hospital stays have reduced over the last decade, there's no doubt about that. But the reality is, whether it's 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, women haven't healed completely.
The stay can be a little longer in private hospitals, but insiders say the pressure to send new parents packing postpartum is real. And it's having detrimental effects on those finding themselves unable to cope.
Well, what we worry about is if they're not feeling confident and supported, especially at that really vital time for mum and bub, we are seeing an increase in postnatal depression for these females.
But Professor Caroline Homer says it might actually be safer to take bubs home early to avoid excess exposure to hospital germs, if good support services are available.
Hospitals are busy places, emergency departments are busy places. They're also places where you get infections, where you get other things going on. So nobody needs to spend time in hospital longer than necessary.
So is this practice of stitch up and ship out the best way to start the baby bonding? Or is the abrupt adios postpartum throwing novice mums in the parenting deep end?
Well, senior health reporter and mum Henrietta Cook has written about this. Henrietta, what was your experience leaving hospital after you gave birth?
I felt completely out of my depth. I was in a lot of pain. It had been quite a traumatic birth. It was an unplanned induction. I didn't feel physically or mentally prepared to go home. I'd had stitches, I was bleeding a lot, and I had no idea how to look after my baby.
My body felt completely broken after 2 babies. I never wanted to leave the hospital. Is that why you wanted to stay a little bit longer as well?
Yeah, I think I wanted the reassurance of the midwives as well as their expertise. I wanted some more tips on how to breastfeed, and I just wanted someone to monitor me and the baby a little bit more.
Did you feel like staying longer was even an option at the time?
I didn't. I did ask if I could stay for longer, and I was told that they needed to free up a bed for someone else. It wasn't the midwives' fault. Their care was incredible. They were just working with what they had, and there was limited resources.
You've written about some harrowing experiences from other women. What are some that really stood out for you?
One that stood out was this poor woman who was asked to leave so quickly that she didn't actually have shoes, and she didn't have control of her bowels, and she had to use a public bathroom at the foyer of the hospital. Her baby was in the special care nursery, and she was struggling to drive, and she had to drive from home to the hospital every 3 hours to take care of that baby. Another woman's been in touch who almost lost her baby on the first night that she came home. I've had other people contact me who've had to go home so soon after the birth, and then they've had other children at home climbing on top of them while they've been recovering from quite traumatic births.
Henrietta, does it shock you at all that in the mid-90s people would stay in hospital for almost a week on average? Why has that changed?
It does shock me. When my mum gave birth to me, which would have been the late 80s, she spoke about how she had a 6-night stay, and she felt very, very relaxed when she was finally discharged. Some people even contacted me and said that they were offered a date with their partner on their 5th night in hospital. The midwives took the babies, and the mums and their partners went out for dinner, and that was in the public system. I think what has changed is that there's this idea that home is the best place for mums and babies after birth, and that's great, and a lot of people do love going home, but I don't think there's the right support there. It's very patchy to adjust to life as a mum at home. The midwives come a few times, and then the maternal child health nurse might kick in, but often the focus is on the baby rather than the mum.
And what sort of impact did going home early have on you, emotionally and physically?
I struggled a lot with breastfeeding. I think that's something that would have been a lot easier for me if I'd been in hospital for longer. I would have had midwives showing me how to do it. And I think, yeah, just mentally it was a huge adjustment. We did not know how to change a baby's nappy. We didn't know how to bathe the baby. We were phoning nurses on call a lot to get advice on how to do things that I suspect back in the 90s you would have been taught while you're at hospital.
Henrietta Cook, really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've obviously experienced this pretty recently, having given birth to a bub 4 months ago. I was really frightened about this, and it's why I stumped up extra cash to go in private, because friends of mine had been kicked out really quickly, and I was like, I'm going home, I'm on my own, I don't have family support. I want like 5-6 days in hospital so I can learn everything and then I can go home feeling like more confident. Unfortunately, where I went was in overflow, so there were like more mothers than they had sort of people to look after them. So I also left the hospital with nobody had showed me how to change a nappy, bath a baby. I had same thing, didn't have a lactation consultant come in, and sometimes I feel like you're at the whims of the midwives. But being somewhere where I could press a button if I had problems 4 or 5 days was invaluable, because you don't know what you're doing when you're going home, and everything is, could this be a problem?
Yeah.
Because you don't know if something happens that's not normal, or is this normal, or is there something wrong with my baby? Is there something wrong with me? You know, it's so good to have somebody close by to ask for help. It's terrifying to be at home on your own so early.
All right, well, we're glad you are here and OK.
Yeah.
Me too.
You're amazing,
Let's touch and go,
You
mate.
are amazing.
Let's touch and go. I will give you the news of it in the advert.